right? And he claims that ugliness among the Greeks it amounted to a refutation, he says. So the Greeks would not believe someone who was ugly. Being ugly ran against your credibility. So that was Nietzsche. Right? And now we're going to start with a brief review of the history of Christianity, which we need to do for our later study of the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. So again, let me, before we get to that, summarize what we did so far. Okay, we contrasted materialism to religious view of the world. We saw the problems materialism entails, the need for an answer to these questions posed by the cosmological argument, the origin of the universe, the laws of nature, the state of nature, the problems with evolutionary theory, how evolutionary theory has been used as a weapon against religion, but evolutionary theory has its own question marks still. And then we saw how that evolutionary theory has influenced Marxism and other political ideologies in the 20th century even. And basically, those ideologies have proposed theories of religion that sometimes are contraposed, such as Marxism and Nietzsche's ideology. Let me mention just a couple more before we close up with this part of the topic. A couple more figures. One is Freud, Sigmund Freud, that I'm sure you are familiar with. Freud, spelled F-R-E-U-D, because it's German, spelled like that. And the other one is Auguste Comte. Auguste Comte. Who is one of the fathers of sociology in the first part of the 19th century. Freud lived in the late 19th and first part of the 20th century. He had his own theory of religion. He thought religion was a disease of the mind, an obsessional neurosis, he said. We talked about this when we talked about value systems. He basically thought it all came down to being healthy. He didn't understand the possibility of other goals in life. And so, religion to him was a pretty unhealthy thing to do. Both Freud and Marx predicted that by the end of the 20th century, that was like a scientific prediction on their part. By the end of the 20th century, religion would have died of natural death. It'd be something to be looked at in museums, they said. Now, the ironic thing, if you wish, is that religion is still alive, but Marxism and Freudian psychoanalysis have pretty much died of natural death, and we looked at them as museum pieces. Okay? And then Auguste Comte also had his own evolutionary theory of religion. He thought that religion was kind of a primitive stage in the thinking of humankind, that then first it started with animistic thought, then it went on to polytheistic thought, and then eventually it ended up in what he calls positivistic thinking, which is based on observation, science, and facts. So this idea of evolution, although Auguste Comte was writing before Darwin, but the idea of evolution was so present, and then with Darwin so powerful, and it has influenced Western thought enormously throughout the second half of the 19th century and then the 20th century, and it has been used as a weapon against religious ideologies. Okay, now we move on to the history of Christianity. Christianity has a 2,000 plus year history. Not 2010, we are in the year 2010. We are recording this in the year 2010. Some students may see this, who knows when, but this year is 2010. Now, Jesus wasn't born 2010 years. He was born 2014 years ago. And the reason is there was some miscalculation in the Middle Ages on the part of a monk, and so we are miscounting the years since the birth of Jesus. So Jesus was actually born in the year 4 before Christ. Okay? The original Christians organized themselves after the death of Jesus and after they claimed he had resurrected. They organized themselves into a community. The word for community in Greek will result in the English word church, which was structured on a 3-level hierarchy. There were the deacons or helpers, the presbyteroi, which is the word out of which you get priest in English, or priests or elders, and then the biscopes, the scope, same root as microscope, telescope, to see, the supervisors, bishops, biscopes. Okay? And for the first 300 years of Christianity or so, while Christianity was persecuted, the persecution of Christianity ended in the year 313, with Emperor Constantine and his famous Edict of Tolerance, or Edict of Milan. So 313, Constantine. So for the first 300 years or so of Christianity, there was a lot of confusion. There was not a single understanding of who Jesus was, whether he was just human, or human and divine, or only divine, whether there was one God or there were many gods. Some Christians believe there were 30 gods, 3 gods, 1 God, all kinds of things. In the year 325, the first General Council, Ecumenical Council as it's called, of the Church took place in Nicaea, the city of Nicaea. Okay? And then they began resolving some of these issues. They decided that Jesus was fully Christian and fully divine, both natures. And these controversies went on for another 2 centuries or so, and they caused some splits in this original single community. And those splinter churches still exist today. The Coptic Church, the Armenian Church, the Ethiopian Church, those are churches that still exist today, very small, that are called monophysite churches. Monophysite, physite meaning physics, meaning they believed Jesus had only one nature. He was God only. He couldn't suffer in the cross as a human because he was God. So those are monophysite churches. But for the most part, the rest of Christians remain part of this, let's call it Orthodox with small r, O. I'll explain why later. Guided by their bishops. And then soon one of those bishops, the bishop of the city of Rome, began to take special precedence over the others, and some theological claims were made as to the idea that Jesus actually in charge Peter with taking care of his flock, and Peter became the first bishop of Rome, and therefore his successors have the same authority. That was a theological claim. We don't need to get into that here now. But something happened which is of a political nature, which will have an impact on Christianity as well. A few years after Constantine, towards the end of the 4th century, in the 380s or so, an emperor divided the Roman Empire into 2 parts, the Western Empire and the Eastern Empire. The capital of the Western Empire remained Rome, but the capital of the Eastern Empire was made to be Constantinople. Constantinople means the city of Constantine. That was a city that Constantine had created. And so that became, it's today Istanbul in Turkey. So it became the capital of the Eastern Empire. It was thought of as one empire with an administrative division, if you wish. But what happened was that by the end of the 5th century, the year usually is taken to be 476 for the collapse, the final collapse of the Western Roman Empire. by the end of this century, the Western Roman Empire, with Rome as its capital,